Welcome back, witches. Happy August. I feel like I've already had a day or a full month. It's Monday. You're gonna watch this the evening that I'm filming this. I'm filming this in the afternoon, which I meant to do at like 7 o'clock this morning. And here we are at 2 o'clock and I'm just now getting around to it. And I feel like it has been a day. I don't know what happened. I don't know where the time went other than fighting on the phone with the bank because online banking is ridiculous and why does nobody answer the tech support line? It's been a very frustrating afternoon. Anyway, a little bit late, but I'm here to recap July. So I talk a little bit about my goals and mostly my reading recap, everything that I read and what I thought about it, and then talk about what is coming a little bit in August. So let's go over the goals first because I talked just like about a few little things, and that is mainly my budget because I am doing the no spend year. It mainly applies to no spending on witchcraft supplies and no spending on books. And so far I've been pretty good about those things, but previous months had some fails and July was a little bit better. So let's look just at my overall spending for July. Besides bills, of course, I had pet expenses, $213.08. I think that was grooming and food and medications. All those things are always in there. On groceries, I spent $294.16, and I have to say that only about 18 of that was for me, and it was cheese. I literally spent like $18 on cheese. I should not be allowed to go grocery shopping during Shark Week. And for gifts, I spent $49.61 on a couple of extra little things because it was my husband's birthday on July 5th. For the cart restock, I have a little cart out front for the mailman and the delivery people, and I stack it with like waters, drinks, gum, chips, snacks, whatever, and I spent $79.74 on that. I spent $32.45 on cleaning supplies. I spent $36.11 on candy for my mother. My mom likes to come over here when she's, actually home and not in Florida. She spends half the year in Florida. When she's actually home, she likes to come over here and help me do gardening. She calls it her therapy. She should go to real therapy. But anyway, instead of like paying her or paying a gardener, I supply her with candy, specifically dark chocolate, and I just like stacked up on a bunch of candy bars, and she usually eats like 3 candy bars and then goes to work on the backyard on a sugar high. So spent that, and then it was Prime Day. So we want to talk about fails. I was gonna do so much better because I had like so many fails in June. I was like, oh, I'm gonna do so much better in July, and then Prime Day. But I only spent $86.76, which I feel like is not that bad. And it was a lot of stock up stuff. I got face wash, I got a hair mask, I got lotion, lip balm, little travel medications, I got bowls for the dog. And then I got emergency supplies because that's my new kit that I'm on. We have emergency supplies for things like there's tornado warning or something, but I am a realist and the DNC is gonna be here next week. And I decided that we're gonna start doing like prepper supplies. Like I'm not gonna be a totally crazy prepper, but I need to have more things on hand because at the end of the day, the question is, if there is some sort of emergency, do you trust your government to take care of you? And I feel like everybody's answer should be no. My answer is no, especially in the state of Illinois. So I also got water purification tabs, duct tape, candles, lighters, notebooks, and a backpack to round out my supplies. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds crazy to my own ears as I'm saying it out loud, but I also think it's logical. So I don't know, let me know where you stand on crazy prepper people. I also spent $31.92 on having a lunch with my friend Betsy. And that was everything that I spent money on. As far as things that came in that I did not spend money on were, first of all, one of the books I'm going to talk about, and also little free library books. I went hunting with John. We like to walk around the neighborhood and we have like 6 little free libraries over here. So I went through all of them and got an assortment of books. So those are on my to be read list. That's my spending goals. I'm not going to talk too much about the other goals because we did a goal refresh in June. You can refer back to those videos of some other goals that I'm adding and things that I'm changing. And I don't have too much update on that yet. Although I do want to say that I am updating my spending on grocery goal because I do want to track just my spending John and I eat very, very differently. I don't think there's like any overlap in any of the food that we eat except maybe eggs, but like otherwise we just like don't share groceries. So I can very clearly figure out the grocery spending between the two of us. So I really want to figure out what my spending is, and I would like to get it down. I think I have a good idea of what I spend every month because they eat the same thing every single day. So I think I've got a good idea, and I would like to spend less than $2,500 in the next 12 months on groceries for me, which is very thrifty because they say the USDA puts out like the plan each month of like what average spending was, and they have, I think, thrifty, low, moderate, and then high like food plans of like what you would spend based on your sex and your age and your family size. And that's how they determine it. And the thrifty plan for females between 21 and 50 is like I think it's $243 a month. And I think I'm less than that. And that's the thrifty plan. So I want to see how low I can get on that grocery spending and just be better about using up the food that I have, not wasting stuff, and stocking up when there's like sales, using coupons, all of those good things. So that is my main thing I'm going to focus on. Let's get into the books, because I did read quite a few books in the month of July. Specifically, I read 20 books for 8,728 pages. I read 3 books, 17 ebooks, and 0 audiobooks. I had 0 1-stars. I did have 1 2-star. I had 8 3-stars, 9 4-stars, and 2 5-stars. So that was actually a pretty solid month for me because I am always reluctant to give things 5 stars. I don't know why I'm so stingy about it, but I continue to be. So let's dive into that. And I will start with the only witchcraft book that I read and gave 5 stars to, and that is, of course, the one that I showed you already, which is Spellcraft and Spellwork, a guide to the magical practice of spells by Ari the Oak Witch here on YouTube. And I've talked about her channel before. I have talked about her before, that I love her style of videos and the way that she presents information and teaches. And if you like her YouTube videos, you will love this book because it comes across very much in her style and her manner of speaking. And I think that she's just really great at teaching topics. So that absolutely came across in this book, so I gave it 5 stars. If you're not familiar with this Pagan Portals line, it is a line of books that are little ones on various topics within witchcraft from the point of view of that author. They're all different authors. So you get a lot of people's like different stories and beliefs as you're learning about these little topics. And then there's always great information at the back, like Ari did in here, of a great bibliography and further reading. So you can continue, if you sort of like the teachings that they put forth in this book, where you can learn more and continue on your learning journey. So I loved this, and I think it just came to me at exactly the right time because I talked about in those goals in June of like decluttering a lot of my witchcraft supplies and sort of figuring out what's going on in my craft, like where I want to go in the future. And that was part of this, was going back to the beginning and going back to like the things that you learn about and put into practice in the beginning, but then as you continue in your practice, you kind of don't think about it anymore. They maybe become a little automatic. And it was great to go back and relearn those basics, get a refresher. And then she had this great section on questions to ask yourself to figure out your own beliefs and your own path. And it's been so long since I asked any of those questions of myself. So it's in this magical theory section of establishing your magical worldview, but you ask yourself, do you believe in spirits, deities? Why do they need or want our offerings? What is the natural world to you? How much of magic do you think is confirmation bias? Is there a clear line between mundane and magical? All of those things that I kind of felt like I knew, but then hadn't actually asked myself those questions and reflected on that. So it was such a good timing for just sitting around thinking about how has my practice changed, because it changes by the month, but really like since I sat down and thought about those questions before, it's been years. So this just came to me, I think, at perfect timing. But there is a lot of awesome information in here. You've got insight into the history of magic, magical theory, practical magic, foundational magical practices, crafting spells, the spellwork process, post-spell procedures, and then actual actual spells to use and try out. And there's a lot of different types in there, so it's not all, you know, light a candle and carry a crystal with you. There's a lot of different options for spells and types of spells. And I think a lot of beginner and advanced practitioners alike are going to enjoy this one because it really walks you through step by step. So for people who are maybe thinking like, well, how does it actually work? Or what's the process? I want to create my own spell. What do I do now? How do I even start that? And then once I've done it, like, what do I do? How do I clean up from it? What do I do with all of the ingredients that I used? How do I track that it was working? How do I know that anything happened? All those questions are answered in here. So I think this is just a great little addition to have on your shelf. And obviously check out Ari's YouTube channel as well, because you'll learn so much more there too. And I think you should get your hands on it. Now let's go through everything else that I read. Like I said, that was my only witchcraft book, so we are just getting into the fiction, mostly fantasy books that I've read from here, and a couple I am just going to breeze through. And specifically, let's just, instead of going in order, let me breeze through them in terms of author and like series that I read. So let's start with Marie Lu, because I mentioned that in the previous month I had read Warcross and Wildcard, and I really enjoyed Marie Lu's writing, and everyone said that Legend was her better series, so I went back and read that. It's Legend, Prodigy, Champion, and Rebel, and the first three are the original trilogy, and then Rebel came out later, but it's set in the same world. It follows the same characters, but 10 years later. So I gave all of them a 4-star, except Champion and Rebel I gave 3.5. I did not like those as much, but I agree that Legend is her better series. I had a lot of fun with it. It's that YA dystopia that I love. We are following Day and June. I don't think I'm giving anything away. I never do spoilers, but also this is from 2011, so it's an older series. But June has been raised as sort of this military, if you're thinking in terms of Hunger Games, she's like a capital darling. She is a prodigy and is going to rise up in the ranks, lives in this really wealthy part of what they call the New Republic, because we are in a post-apocalyptic world where the former United States is split in half, and they are over in the West Coast. They're in Los Angeles, so they are the Republic. And it's sort of this military regime. And Day, on the other hand, lives in the slums. His mom thinks that he died. He failed his test to go up in the military like June did. So he is just living on the streets. He's stealing. He's thwarting the military every step of the way because he doesn't like the government. So they end up at odds, of course, but then it's like a, you know, rivals to lovers story. So nothing is as it seems, of course, in a YA dystopia world, so that they end up working together to fix what is going wrong, basically everything in their country. So follows them over the 3 original of the trilogy. And I didn't like the third one as much because I didn't like the ending as much, but then that ending was sort of fixed in Rebel, which was the 4th book and came out a few years later, and instead follows Day and his brother. And I just didn't like his brother as much as a main character. And June is, of course, still in it. She's still a main character, but we don't get her point of view in this one. But it was a better ending, but just not as good of a character as Day and June were in the original, like, 3 books. So that's what I have to say about that. And then also Marie Lu, I did read The Young Elites, which is the first in another one of her series, and that one I'm not going to continue because I gave that a 3.5, and now that I'm looking back and I'm like maybe generous, because it had plot, like, pacing issues. I feel like it was kind of long, but like nothing happened. And I just did not love any of the characters, and then I read like the synopsis to see what happens in like the rest of the series, and I know like the main character that it follows, I don't like her, so I'm not gonna continue with that series. So that was my Marie Lu. And I also read Dance of Thieves and A Vow of Thieves by Mary Pearson, and I enjoyed both of those. I think I gave both of them a 4 stars. I did, both 4-star read, and that is YA romantasy. Enjoyed both of those. It relies on the romance definitely more than the plot, so leans heavily romance, and I am a plot girly. I prefer the plot-led stories, but still had a good time with it. I think if it was more plot, less romance, I would have given it a 5, but solid 4 stars. In that one, we are following Kazi and Jace. Kazi is one of the soldiers for her queen. There are a couple of queens, kings in this kingdom area. So she is going over to another kingdom where a king is ruling. However, there's a family, Jace's family, that really controls this one area. And they are sent there on like a secret mission. So Jace and his family have no idea that they're coming, but then once they get there, causes a huge ruckus. Eventually they are invited into the castle, and Jace and his family are trying to win them over because they want to be their own, recognized as their own sovereign area. And he thinks that he can win over Kazi and get her favor and get the queen to agree to his terms to make them their own area. Lots more happens after that, but I don't want to ruin any of the plot. So both of them were great reads. Also in the realm of series upon series and reading the same author, Rick Riordan, I love the Percy Jackson series. I love middle grade. I don't care how old I am. I love reading some middle grade books. I think that they're easy to get through. They're fun. The stakes are lower. Sometimes I read a lot of fantasy and high fantasy. And then especially in the fall, I get into like horror things, and sometimes I need a break from that. Like my brain needs a break and my emotions need a break, and middle grade is perfect for that. Middle grade fantasy with low stakes is perfect. Love the Percy Jackson, the original series, but never went back to it. And then I realized just how many books that he has. So I went back and I read Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard. There are 3 in that series, and this was one of the ones that I found in a little free library in some like perfect condition. So I read that and then got the other 2 from the library, read those, and then I also read the Kane Chronicles, which is also 3 books. And they are exactly written like Percy Jackson, except Magnus Chase, obviously the main character is Magnus, and it is the Norse deities. And in the Kane Chronicles, we have Carter and Sadie, and it is the Egyptian deities. But it literally reads exactly like Percy Jackson. So Rick Riordan has a system and a thing that he's doing, and it works, and I like it. I gave the Magnus Chase series 4 stars and the Kane Chronicles 3.5. I just didn't, Egyptian gods are hard for me. That pantheon is tough, and it's like, it's tough to understand and it's tough to write about. And I think he does a good job with it of like figuring it out. Like obviously he takes like crazy liberties. If you read Percy Jackson, you know he takes crazy liberty with the Greek gods too. But it was just, it's a lot. Egyptian, it's a lot. So that one wasn't as fun for me. I don't know that I liked the dual POV between Carter and Sadie. They're like brother and sister. So I just didn't know as much about that, whereas Percy Jackson, I know a lot about Greek mythology, so it's like more fun for me to read. And Magnus Chase, I know a little bit more about Norse deities, so that was fun too. And there was a line that I wrote down from Magnus Chase. I love this line where he said, "Myths are simply stories about truths we've forgotten." I was like, I love that. I am continuing more Rick Riordan in August with the same in like the Greek world. I knew that he does like Greek and Roman. So it's like the Heroes of Olympus and then the Trials of Apollo. There's like 10 more books to read in those. So I'm gonna work on those in August. For a standalone 4 stars on Kindle Unlimited, I read The Umbral Storm by Alec Hudson, and I have no idea when the second book is coming out, and that bothers me. I need it. It is fantasy. We have 3 main characters, Darren, Heth, and Aaliyah. And this one, it's long, it's 656 pages, and there's a lot of setup, a lot of world building. Normally that bores me, but I wasn't bored in this one. I thought the story, like the plot was pretty good, like pacing was pretty good. So I liked the setup and world building, and that's why I want there to be more books. But it doesn't say when the next one is coming out. So if you like high fantasy, then you should read this one. It's good, but maybe wait a little bit so you're not waiting on the second book like I am. But it is following these 3 that they basically find them as orphans, the beginning of the story. They're not related, and they seem to possess the same special magic. There are a few people who can wield what they call shards. They take basically a crystal shard into their body. You can like see it sticking out of their chest, and that gives them some sort of magic power. Everybody's is a little bit different, and only certain people are able to wield these shards, and then other people are able to withstand them. Like some people just can't even like be, most people in this world can't even be around them, can't even be in the same place. So 2 of these kids are thought that they could take the shards in. They have to like pass trials, of course, to get one. And then the other one is one of the special people who can be around people with shards for a long period of time. So he's a servant in their castle, like one of the guards. So it is the story of the three of them coming to this castle, being trained, seeing who's going to get the shards and be able to wield magic, and then ultimately protect their castle from the different castles that have different types of magic and different types of shards, because they're always at odds. So it was an interesting world building, interesting magic. I like that idea of the shards of crystals being, magical and giving them magical powers. I thought it was interesting and fun, but I really want the second book. I want to know what happens. I really am going in no order whatsoever, am I? The one I gave 5 stars to, high fantasy, The Will of the Many by James Islington. And that is one that I own and am glad that I do. It's something that I put on my wish list earlier this year as a gift, because I thought, just like from the description and everything, that I was going to like it. And then I heard a lot of reviews from people I follow on YouTube, and a lot of people that I agree with loved it, but then some people who normally I have the same views as thought it was overrated. So I wasn't sure, and then like put off reading it, but turns out I gave it 5 stars and I loved it. And it's an MLM of energy. It's literally a pyramid scheme. So I thought the premise of this was incredibly interesting. It's sort of Roman based, which you can like just tell based on the cover. But there's a lot of like old Latin names. They set up things kind of like the Colosseum. So it's got that like old Roman influence, but then there is a lot of like urban fantasy magic that goes along with it. And essentially everybody's got their energy, and no choice by 18, but most do it earlier. You have to sign up to give your energy. If you read Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas, it's kind of like that, where they do that drop and they get to be immortal, but then the drop sucks up some of their energy, and they use that to power the cell phones and like the lights and stuff that they have in the Crescent City world. Same here. So you give some of your energy, except you are giving it to the person on the pyramid above you. I think there's 8 levels here of their pyramid. So most people are on that bottom level, just like an MLM, and they give some of their energy, I think it's half, to the person above them. And that person gets energy from like 4 people below them, but then also gives part of their energy to the person above them all the way up the pyramid. So there's just like 3 people or something at the very top of the pyramid, and they get the energy of the people below them. Getting the energy makes you stronger. Yeah, a lot of them are, fighters, military, because they can't get hurt then. It powers things like their lights and things and ships the same way that it does in Crescent City. And of course, if you are giving away some of your energy, it's essentially your life force. So you are being drained. So the masses at the bottom are being drained quickly. They die earlier. They live hard lives. And as you go up the pyramid, the more energy that you have, the more power you have. And the richer you are, yada, yada, you get it. Pyramid scheme. From the beginning, we are following the character of Viz, and he has not seeded any of his energy yet. He has managed to avoid it. He's living in an orphanage. We find out very early in the story, this is not a spoiler, that he is actually a prince from one of the last holdouts that tried to stop this empire and didn't want this seeding of energy, didn't like how it was set up. So they tried to hold out, but they killed his whole family, and he went into hiding. And somebody that is higher up in this new organization finds him, has no idea what his background is, but basically wants him to go sort of undercover into their elite school that they have for the top of the top people in these like higher kids in these higher up families that they go into, this basically military school. You have options of where you can go after you graduate, but essentially it's all about power and fighting each other and winning this competition at the end. And even in the school, you rank up in levels, and there's less people like the higher that you rank up. So you want to basically win this entire competition and be the top ranked at the end of the year. So you get your choice of position within the government, whether you're going to go into what's sort of like the Roman Senate, or you're going to go into the religious aspect, whatever it is. So it's religion that's running this school, and this one guy who's in the Senate doesn't trust them, thinks shady things are going on there, thinks kids are dying. So he taps Viz just sees him as this regular kid who has somehow skirted giving up any of his energy, seems to be super intelligent, and is in this orphanage, comes to get him and says, hey, you did this for me, go undercover at the school, we're gonna find some stuff out. In exchange, you get access to my name and my power and my rank, and you can get up through society, and it's going to put off for when you have to seed some of your energy. You might be able to get out of it for a very long time. And Viz jumps at it because otherwise he would have to find a way to flee the continent, and he has no idea how he's going to do that. So he's like, well, at least if I go undercover, it's going to buy time. So he goes into the school, he's got to get up in the ranks. Really, his benefactor wants him to win the entire competition. So that is the best I can summarize it. There's so many things that happen. I mean, this is a hunker of a book, okay? There's a lot of plot going on here, but I loved it, kept my attention. I read it so fast. I think I read it in 2 days because I just couldn't put it down. I loved everything that was happening. I loved the world, the plot, the characters. So I cannot wait for the second one to come out. It does get crazy at the end, very fantasy, sci-fi stuff going on. And I was like so confused as to where it could be going. So I really want to find out more information because the end is like a total plot twist, and I cannot wait for the second book. So highly recommend this one if you have not read it yet. Oh, this is like a roller coaster. Maybe I should do this in some sort of order, but now we are going to the one that I gave 2 stars to, which is A Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, which is poetry. And I thought just like maybe novel and verse is not my thing. This is my novel companion ultra where I track all the books, and there's some reading challenges in here, and one of them was read a novel in verse, and I was like, okay, let's do it. This was like a highly rated one for a novel in verse in poetry. And maybe that's just not my thing. But also maybe because of the subject matter, have I lived in Chicago too long that I'm a little jaded? Like I just did not have the emotional impact that it had for other people. I just didn't love it. So I only gave it 2 stars. But we have the main character, Will, at the beginning of the story. His brother is shot and killed, and there's tons of gang violence in his area. This is always happening, and he thinks he knows who did it. So the next morning he wakes up, gets his brother's gun, and decides that he's going to go kill the guy who shot his brother. And the entire story is him in the elevator going down, and at each floor it stops, and somebody, a ghost, gets on from his past that was also killed through this gang and gun violence, and goes all the way down to stop at the bottom, tells like all of their stories, and it's just supposed to be like an emotional impact about the cycle of violence. And I don't know that it had the emotional impact on me that it's supposed to, and I think it's maybe just because of where I live. I'm super jaded. But also maybe just like the poetry thing and novel and verse was not my thing, so don't recommend that one. One I do recommend if you keep your expectations in check is Bonesmith by Nikki Pau Preto. And I think the second one is coming out soon, but this was billed as Gideon the Ninth meets the White Walkers of Game of Thrones, and I love both of those. Gideon the Ninth is one of my favorite books, and I love Game of Thrones. That's high praise, and that's really something to compare it to. It does meet it. There's a lot that pulls from Gideon. Like once you're reading it, you definitely will think like, oh yeah, this has got a lot of Gideon the Ninth in it. But I think you have to keep your expectations in check. If you are expecting it to be Gideon or Game of Thrones, I think you'll be disappointed. So just like go into it with like, this is going to be a fun necromancy book, and I'm not going to think too hard about it. Then it'll be good because it's YA fantasy, so it's not like the same level as Tamsin Muir's Mind. She's crazy. But if you keep your expectations in check, I think you will have a good time with this. It's heavy on the telling, world building instead of showing, so I don't love that as much. That's why I knocked off a star, just because when they do that, it like takes a while to get to the plot. Like once you actually do get to the plot, then it like goes quicker and it's better, but it's just that like beginning section that you've got to get past. So that's why I gave it 4 stars. But we've got Ren, who is what they call a bonesmith. She can control bones, so exactly like Gideon the Ninth, it's all necromancy and controlling bones, fighting ghosts. She's part of the Bone House, and there are different ones throughout her continent, and different houses can control different magic. So there are ones that can control gold or silver. There's blood magic. So I love the different magic systems, and I love anything with necromancy. So, you know, controlling bones and fighting ghosts, sign me up. And I did end up having a good time with that, so I'm looking forward to the second one. And last up that of my going to rate highly, both 4 stars and on Kindle Unlimited, is House of Bane and Blood and House of Mirth and Malice by Alex L. Menard. And I really enjoyed both of those. They are fantasy romance, and sometimes like the fantasy romance on Kindle Unlimited can be hit or miss for me, but these were a hit. I really enjoyed both of them. It is your standard rivals to lovers fanro, exactly what you would expect. It was great world building, great magic system, a great relationship between the characters, the banter. The only thing that I took off a star for was it's just a duology. So it's just those 2 books, and they're both pretty long. So I mean, I liked it and I had a good time, but I think there's so many different things going on, and I love a great world building and complicated magic system, but I think in just 2 books that maybe you didn't need all of it. Like it got like a little bit needlessly confusing, like there was just too much going on. So I think some of it could have been cut back or could have been extended into more books. I'm happy with duologies because, like I said, I was reading the Rick Riordan stuff, and the next 2 that I'm reading are 5 books each. So I love a good duology, but I think it should have either been less complicated or more books. And the ending does leave it open to do something in this world further. So there could be more books that would answer more questions, but maybe just a little complicated for a duology. But we've got Camilla and Nikolai, and they are like crosstown rivals. Camilla is the heiress to the only train in town, and Nikolai is basically a gangster. It is said to be like Peaky Blinders, but I never watched Peaky Blinders, so I can't tell you if that is accurate. But Camilla's brothers, her father died, and Camilla's brothers basically sell her. They need money, they're in debt. They want to keep their train, so they basically sell her into marriage. They were going to sell her off to somebody else, but Nikolai steps in, one of the magic wielders. So Camilla doesn't have any magic, but there are across the river, there are various types of magic. You've got bleeders, so there is a version that are like vampires, but Nikolai has a bunch of different powers. He can stop time or slow down time. He can control the winds, lots of different things that he can do. And of course, he's beautiful. She loves him secretly. So this is, they not enemies. They don't hate each other. But he steps in to save her from this other marriage and was like, how about you marry me instead? And I'll take over your debts and we can run your train company together. Your standard rivals to lovers, but I had a very good time with it. So I definitely recommend those 2 as well. Okay, that was way too long. I have been sitting here talking for half an hour about books and my budget, but mostly books. Today has been wild. My mood reflects it. That is everything for this video. I will see you all in the next one. Let me know if you have read anything that's on my list, if you are going to be checking out anything that I read. Lots of things that I recommend. It was a pretty good reading month for me. Let me know what you will be reading in August. I'll see you in the next one.